Hello, everybody. Welcome to Creative Pro and our live stream. It is late May, and we are getting ready for Creative Pro Week in Phoenix next week. So that is very much on my mind and really looking forward to it. And we can talk more about that after we talk about today's topic, which is pattern making in Photoshop. And in honor of our upcoming event live in Phoenix and online, I thought I would make this little pattern with some cacti, right? Plural. So I'm going to show you how to do this in Photoshop, which is really exciting. And that is typically something that you might do maybe in Illustrator. Illustrator has really robust pattern making tools, and it's pretty awesome, but not everyone uses Illustrator or is fully comfortable in Illustrator, and sometimes you just want to do it in Photoshop. So that is what we're going to talk about today. Before we dive into that, let's not be here. Let's pop over to the chat and see what is going on. I see Teresa is very excited for Creative Pro Week. Me too. It's going to be so fun. And if you can join us in Phoenix, awesome. And if not, hey, you can join online too. And it's going to be great. And we have online moderators that really help you feel like you're getting that social experience. Like you can ask questions to the speakers. It's going to be really cool. So there's a lot of ways to participate, even if you can't be there in person. I was asking before we got started today, I had asked in the chat if anybody had made patterns before. And Teresa said she's tried making patterns in Photoshop, but they aren't very dependable. It's not as robust as Illustrator. That is for sure. But you can do it. And it's I think simpler in a way because it's just like a little bit more straightforward. But there are some funny things about it that you kind of have to know. Um, and Teresa said that she really likes the organic nature of hand-drawn patterns, but that can be a whole different thing. And yeah, there's a lot of ways to create all of that stuff, including, as Teresa also mentioned somewhere in here, that she had used them in Adobe. Here we go, in Adobe Capture. So that's a lot of fun. That's another tool you can use to create patterns. So there's a lot of ways you can do this stuff, and that's part of what makes it so cool. So as we go here, just feel free to pop your questions in the chat, and we'll pause every now and then and take a peek and see how we can answer those. But in the meantime, let's just dig right in, right? So when you're making patterns, you can work with other rectangles. Like it doesn't have to be a square, but my brain hurts if I do that. So we're working with square today in Photoshop. So I have this document just set up here. It's just 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels. Nothing fancy about it. That's all there is. The artwork that we're going to be using, obviously you could draw your own, you could bring in something like a vector artwork from wherever. I just downloaded this free little guy from Adobe Stock's free collection. It's just a little hand-drawn looking cactus, and I thought this would be perfect. So I'm just going to select all of this and copy it and bring it in here. And we're going to just start by making I think it's called like a toss pattern. So I'm going to turn this into a smart object just so I can scale it around and move it all around and do whatever with it. And we'll just go about positioning this in a few different ways. So obviously, if you've looked into making patterns at all, there's like lots of different ways you can do it, right? And there's different types of patterns. There's these tossed patterns, which are kind of what they sound like. Like you just tossed the artwork out onto the canvas. Those are probably the easiest ones to start with. But then there's all kinds of different repeats you can create. And Illustrator's better about helping you do all of that. But I am going to show you how we can create a toss pattern. And then I'm going to show you how you can set up your own half drop repeat in Photoshop. That's actually like really easy, and it's kind of a cheat because Photoshop doesn't have a tool to do that for you. Like in Illustrator, you can tell it you want a hexagonal repeat. You can have offset brick patterns and all kinds of different sort of tiling patterns. But in Photoshop, it's like way more straightforward than that, but we can still have a lot of fun with it. So I'm just going to pop in this little cactus here, and I'm going to try to toss him around. I like a good pattern where there's no direction to it. So a lot of these patterns would maybe end up like on packaging, right? Or on textiles. So you can print patterns and have them printed out on fabric. You can put them on clothing, all kinds of different things. So it's nice when they can be used in any direction. So they don't always have like an up direction, right? So with this tossed pattern, I'm going to duplicate this cactus a few times, and sometimes I'm going to put it upside down because I don't want there to be any one right side up situation. And so maybe we'll scale this down a few different sizes. Maybe I'm going to flip some of these, and I mean, that's kind of the process. What's nice about this is because I made this a smart object, every time that I duplicate one of these pieces, I can go ahead and scale it back up a little bit. And, as long as I'm not enlarging it past its original size, then we don't have to worry about loss of quality. So it just kind of makes it a little bit easier to work with. So let's flip this maybe a couple more times. And we should probably have one of these big guys upside down. So it doesn't look like there's kind of one direction, but also maybe one direction that's correct. So I'd like to have both of these guys be big, and I'm going to lock the background here so that I don't keep clicking on it. Another thing that's really handy is when you work like this, to switch between the different layers of the different items. When you're using that move tool, there is this option up here to turn on auto select, but I don't like to have that on by default. So what I do is when I want to be able to auto select a particular layer just by clicking on it, I hold down the command key. And as I do that, you can see that can I do both at the same time? You can see that it's toggling this auto select on and off. So if I hover over, like, I don't know which layer this is, you can see there's a number of them, but I can just grab it. If I hold down command or control and I mouse around over here, maybe it will select it. No, it's not. There we go. So as I hold down command or control, you can see that I'm getting these little purple outlines, and they're showing me that if I click while I'm holding command or control, if I click right here, that will auto select that layer. So it's handy to work that way, I think. Let's see. So we're going to toss this stuff around a little bit. I don't know. Obviously, there's a lot of time and effort involved with organizing these things in a way that is nice and well spaced and whatever. So You might think, okay, I want to have everything fit on my little tile square, and like that looks pretty good. But we when we turn on our pattern preview, we're going to realize we probably want to have some things actually crossing over on the edge. So let's just pretend this is our starting point, our starting place. We're going to come up to the view menu, and there's an option here called pattern preview. And when we turn that on, it's telling us that, hey, this works best when you're using smart objects, which is another reason why we already have smart objects. But we'll just click OK. And now we can zoom out, and it's showing us what this pattern looks like if we extrapolate it out and repeat the tile. So the artwork within this little blue line here, that is our tile. And then everything out here, it's showing us what it would look like if it gets repeated out. So if we don't like some of the spacing here, we can solve that by moving things so they might reach over the tile a little bit. And what you'll notice is that as we move them around on our canvas, they're also moving out here, showing us what the repeat would end up looking like. So we have to think about how dense we want this pattern to be and which direction. This is the hard part. So today we might not make a super pretty pattern on camera because it takes a lot of time to get everything spaced out just the way you want it. Oh, come on. Sometimes I don't know why this guy's not working. There we go. So, and maybe we need one more little guy up here. So I'm just holding down Alt or Option to make copies of each of these little bits and kind of scattering them around. And somehow this is not, my auto select thing is not working as well as it normally would. Where are you, big guy? Huh. Ah, there it is. Okay, so look at that. So if we zoom out and we feel like we're happy with that, that's a really great starting place. We could come in here and maybe add a background color. So I'm going to just grab like some kind of color, like maybe this, or maybe actually let's do like a green. There we go. For our cactus. And one of the things that I thought was kind of fun was then to sprinkle a little bit of spatter paint on this, kind of just to give it a little bit of texture. So I decided I would use this brush that I happen to have. This is from Adobe's free collection of brushes. So if you are not familiar with them, you can get them for free from the brush panel here. If you click the little cogwheel and you click Get More Brushes, this will take you to a web page on Adobe's website where any Creative Cloud subscriber can just download whatever brushes you want for free. So this is a brush from a spatter brush collection called Big Beautiful Mess. And if I double click on that and we choose a color, maybe like a little bluish something, let's see how this is going to look like. Not a ton of contrast, but maybe that's okay. So I'm just kind of spritzing some paint on here to give it a little bit of texture and everything. And that's basically how easy it is to make a pattern. So you just want to keep in mind that as you drag any one of these pieces, one of these elements, as you drag it around on the canvas, you can see that as I'm moving the one that's on the tile, the same piece is moving around within those repeats. So sometimes it can be a little tricky to know, like if you're trying to grab this, you can't grab these ones out here because the actual artwork is the pieces that are on the tile. But what's nice is as we drag this up and across the boundary, we'll see it start to come up on the bottom side, so you can see how it repeats. So it's all good and connected. And then if we want to turn off the pattern preview, we can just come up here and go back to pattern preview and turn it off. And this is our actual tile. But this is not what we would actually save out. So we'll get back to that in a minute. Let's pop over to our chat and see what's going on in the chat. Hi, Randy. Randy says, let's see. Randy says, I love making patterns. I've only used Photoshop and I don't know how to use Illustrator. Well, if you love making patterns, Randy, Illustrator is like kind of the king of the pattern making software for this kind of stuff. But it, it does have a learning curve, but there's lots of resources out there for learning how to do that. And our good friend Laura Coyle does a lot of that. So she's got a lot of resources on the CreativePro website where you can learn all about how you might do that in Illustrator. But yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. Teresa says, I think auto select is struggling because the background is transparent. Yeah, that's part of it. But usually those purple smart guides will kick in and it helps. Like when I did this the other day, it wasn't, maybe if yeah, it sometimes it does select the background, but if you pay attention to the purple smart guides, it helps. But I think maybe I was just moving too fast. But yeah, that's probably it. Sheila says, I use Photoshop and Procreate. Yeah, Procreate's another fun one. That's great. And then, it's nice you can work on your sofa curled up with your iPad. I'm curious, Sheila, if you use Photoshop on the iPad when you're doing that stuff, or are you on the desktop? There's so many different options, right? Lots to think about. Okay, let's go back over to the desktop here and let's talk about how we actually save this out. Because you'll notice when we're not in pattern preview mode, we can notice that this cactus, for example, maybe I can zoom in and show this a little better. This cactus up here, it's going off the tile. So we should see it coming back up on the bottom. But the only way that we see that is when we are in pattern preview mode. So now we can see our actual pattern. When we turn off pattern preview mode, you'll notice those little overhanging bits, they disappear. So you want to keep that in mind, because if I just saved this document right now, this is not a pattern tile. So we have a couple of different ways when we're talking about exporting this stuff. We can first create a pattern, like a pattern swatch here in Photoshop. And there's a couple ways to do that, and I will show you. The other thing that we can do is if we want to send this to Spoonflower or something, if we're into surface design and you want to be able to make a t-shirt out of this or something, we need to export a finished, a JPEG of the tile. And we would want to make sure that we're not just saving this when the pattern preview is off, because we're not actually looking at the repeats right now. So let's do this. Let's go back and turn on pattern preview. And I'm going to tell it to quit giving me this message because it gets old really fast. All right, so here is our pattern preview. So there's two ways, at least, to make a Photoshop pattern. So if we come up and we just choose edit, we can choose define pattern. And we can see that in this little swatch, I mean, if you really look closely at it, it is seeing and defining the pattern with these overlapped edges. So that is good. So we'll just call this is a prickly pear cactus, right? I think. Prickly pear? Is it pear? Pear? I don't know. Shouldn't have gone this route. I should have just said cactus, but I'm rolling with it. So I've now named this tile, and the tile now shows up in our patterns panel. So if we go to window patterns, and I happen to have mine right here, and I close all this stuff, we can see here is the pattern that we just made. And you can see if I hover on it, my little flyout pop-up thing says prickly pear, and it tells me the size of this tile. So that's one way to do it. But an even easier way is to make sure you're in pattern view mode, preview, and then just come to the bottom of your patterns panel and just click the plus button and then give it a name like pokey pear. Okay, so now we have two of these instances. That is it for the pattern, like the swatch in Photoshop, right? So you could save out these swatches. If we come up to this pattern menu, we can export our selected patterns. So if you make a pattern in Photoshop and you want to be able to sell it or share it or whatever, this is how you would do that. However, if now you're like, well, now I want to export this for spoon flour or something, then we want to, and actually, I don't know if we do like a file save, let's just test this because I've never actually done it this way. Let's make a JPEG and see. We'll put it on the desktop and call it test pattern. We'll make it JPEG. And we're doing this with pattern preview on. So now I just want to see if that's going to do it, because I've not done it this way. Here it is. And it did. So you could just save that out as a JPEG. So you can see that we have the half of this cactus and then the repeat is showing up at the bottom because we have pattern preview turned on. So that is key. The other thing that you could do if you just like want to test this, or maybe you want to move things around in your block like as a whole, we can also hide all of this. So I'm going to select the bottom layer and this, and I'm going to group it and just call it pattern. And we'll just hide it. Let's get out of pattern preview mode. And then if we just take the pattern swatch and we drag it into our document in the layers panel, like directly from the pattern panel, we can just drag that in here and now we see the pattern is applied. And we could move it around however you want your tile to be, and it is always going to be properly repeated. So that's pretty exciting. And then you could save that out. So that is the basics of that. Let's pop over in the chat and see. I see people having comments and questions. Oh, yes. Barbara says that she just watched the Illustrator Summit and it was awesome. It was. And Teresa, you taught at that too, right? I think you were also there. I haven't made it through the whole thing yet, but I am day by day working through bits. And I know Laura did a whole session on pattern making and it was great. It was really super great, specifically in Illustrator. Um, and Sheila says, nope, she does work on Photoshop on the desktop. Me too. I have not yet embraced it on the iPad yet. I don't I don't know. I don't use my iPad in that way a lot. Everyone handles it differently, I guess. But oh yeah, so Teresa wasn't at that one this year, but you've done it in the past, I know. And that's always amazing. So she is pointing out that you can then send this image that we just made, for example, this tile, you can then send it out to a print service and you can get your pattern printed on a product. And that could be anything from a tote bag to a coffee mug to a hat to a t-shirt to bedding to, I mean, wallpaper. Did you know that? Spoonflower will even print your pattern on wallpaper for you. Can you imagine? Like that's so that's so fun. It's so exciting. Yeah. So it's really fun. There's a lot of possibilities and it's great to be able to know how to do this stuff in Photoshop. Um and Sheila says, yeah, she likes the screen size much better in on the desktop. I get it. And I'm like the app is like different enough that I don't know. I feel you, Sheila. I just prefer to work on my laptop all the time. But Teresa is part of our team at Creative Pro and yeah, she has been busy. We're keeping her busy with all kinds of stuff. So we're grateful for you, Teresa, and all that you're doing here. And Teresa will be teaching a couple of things out in Phoenix as well with color swatches, right? In Illustrator. That is one of the things. And I'm looking forward to that. That's one of the things I struggle with is dealing with the swatches in like Illustrator and back and forth between the libraries, and it's a little tricky sometimes. But that's so funny. All right, so let's go back over and I want to show you a couple of other things. So that is a look at just like a simple pattern, a simple toss pattern, right? So you set up your document, you toss your artwork onto it, you turn on pattern preview mode, you move things around until it looks good, and then you click the new pattern swatch. And as long as you are in that preview mode, you can then just save that tile out as a JPEG. Make sure, if you're sending it to a service like Spoonflower or any number of those places, you want to know ahead of time what the specs are that they want your file to be. Like how many pixels, what's the resolution, all of that stuff. And that way you'll know that you're setting it up properly for their system. But today I'm just making up print specs. Okay, so that is one option. So you have your pattern swatch that lives in Photoshop, and then you have your actual like image tile that you would send to a service like Printful or Spoonflower or whoever. The other thing I was going to show you is how you can not fake, we're going to really make it, but Photoshop doesn't have a built-in way to create a half drop repeat. So normally when you make a tile and it gets repeated, it ends up being in a grid, right? Just like straight up grid. But there are lots of different options to patterns. You can have honeycomb pattern tiling, different kinds of offsets. So one of them, kind of the next step in complexity, is a half drop pattern. So that means that the tile is offset by half. And Photoshop doesn't give you an easy way to do that, but I learned about a little cheat that I thought was really interesting. And so I'm going to show that to you. And I made my little design here. So here's basically what you do. So I'm going back to the drawing board. Actually, I'm going to go back. We will keep our texture spray and everything the same, but I'm going to hide the artwork. And then what you basically do is if we grab our shape tool here, and let me just pick like a totally contrasting shape color. And I'm going to just make a square. And if we put our square in here, and I've got it centered, and I'm going to hold shift and rotate around so I get this diamond situation happening. And we'll go ahead and drag it right up to the edge. So I'm holding shift to keep it proportional, and I'm holding alt or option to be able to scale it from the center like this. But I'm just gonna do this. Now, this is not gonna be part of the pattern. It's just here as a guide. Okay, so we have this shape here. Maybe that color is not a good contrast. Let's do something like that. That's much better. Okay, so then what I did to just save us the time of watching me drag things around on screen, I made a version of the tile where all of the cacti are within this diamond shape. And then if we go back into view and we go into pattern preview, again, the diamond's going to go away, but just so we can see. Then I'm just going to copy this collection of the cacti that are in the diamond and the diamond. And so I've got it all selected. I'm going to hold Alt or Option, and I'm going to drag a copy up here until the diamonds snap. There we go. Snap together like that. And we can confirm that. And then if we hide our diamonds, we now just created this half drop repeat. How cool is that? It's like a little kind of a cheat. So it's just a different way of tiling these things. So we kind of faked it. And if you look really carefully and you feel like you want to adjust the spacing of all this stuff, then obviously we can go in, and if your auto select is cooperating, you can move things around until you're really happy with the spacing. Come on, there we go. You got to click right when those guides are lit up. But it's a way you can like fake, not fake, but like sort of hack your way into a half drop pattern, even here in Photoshop. So, and then again, we could save this out as a JPEG. So we'll come back here. Let's put it back on my desktop so we can find it, and we'll call it Cactus Half Drop and make it a JPEG and save. And now if we look at, there's our half drop pattern, and here's our just straight up tile pattern. Isn't that cool? Obviously this one's more dense because I just shoved everything into that diamond shape, but pretty cool and really quite simple. So then we can also, again, make this into a pattern swatch, not just the actual document tile, but a swatch by, again, just going down to the pattern panel and clicking the little plus, and we'll call this Cactus Half Drop. And that is all there is to it. Let's see what questions people have. Oh yes, Teresa's going to be teaching about wrangling swatches for not just Illustrator, but also Photoshop and InDesign. So I need that because I get so frustrated trying to get swatches back and forth between things. And I try to do it with libraries, but it never seems to work the way my brain thinks it will. So that's always a party. But anybody else have any other questions about patterns or trouble that you've run into with it? I know in Illustrator, it's kind of a lot trickier. I mean, it's simple, but like there's a lot more to know, and there's a lot more potential snags that you have to look out for, but I feel like in Photoshop, it's pretty straightforward, which is really helpful, I think. I appreciate that. Um, right on. So let's see. The other thing that I was going to show you, has anybody tried to make a pattern in Photoshop in the older days before we had pattern preview? I don't even know when it was added, but if you have ever tried it in the old school way, it is tricky, but you can still do it, and it is useful for some things, maybe like a texture that already exists, for example. So I did prepare a little. Oh, Sheila has a question. Let's go back to this. Sheila says, can you do the same half drop with an OG pattern too? I don't know what that means. Can you explain, Sheila? And then we'll see. I don't know. I'm not sure what your question means. So let me know in the chat and we'll come back to that. Let's go back to our desktop here, because I did prepare one other example. I'm going to turn off this pattern preview before I lose my mind. And there's what we started with. And I'll show you how how you can like mock this up too. But let's say that you are trying to create a texture, right? And that could be for anything. That could be for a wallpaper. That could be for, you could just want it as like a background on some composite or something that that you're making. And so that might be that you're starting with an actual photograph of a thing, right? Whereas over here, when we built this tile, we started with just this artwork and we were in full control of how we arranged it and everything. But sometimes, what if you just want to like take a photo like this and somehow make it seamless so it can repeat? And it's actually much easier now with generative fill. So here's what I would do. Let's crop this first because my brain just works better this way. So I'm going to crop this into a specific size. So we're going to crop it to that same 1500 by 1500 because that's plenty. So I'm just going to crop it right to the center. And here's the old school trick. This is our tile, but obviously if we just repeat it, if I make a copy of it and move it over, like let me show you. Let's change the width to 3000 and we'll double this over. So if I, let me unlock the background and then do that. Oh, stop. Go back to image canvas size. There we go. And we'll move it over here and we'll make it relative and we'll say the width needs to be 200%. Oh my gosh. Image canvas size with 3000. Okay. Oh, I had it set to pixels. That's why. So if we just take the existing tile and we just move it over here, we're going to have a seam, right? I mean, you may not notice it totally, but like it's there. So we have like rocks that just end weirdly. So what we need to do, we've got this cropped, and it's really important when we do this crop, if we uncrop it, we want to make sure when we are doing this crop that we delete cropped pixels, because otherwise it will jack up the next move. And just yesterday when I was prepping this, I forgot to make sure my deleted cropped pixels get removed. And it took me a minute to realize why it wasn't working. So you want to make sure you delete the cropped pixels. And now we're going to run an offset filter. So that means we're going to go to filter, other, offset. So that means we're going to take our image and basically split it. We're going to cut it across this way in half and cut it this way in half. And we're going to like shuffle all the pieces around so that the edges, the seams are meeting in the middle. So because this is a 1500 pixel image, we want to offset horizontally and vertically by half of that. And then we want to make sure we have it wrap around. So by doing this, now if we zoom in, you can see that the seam is now running through the middle horizontally, and it's running through the middle vertically. You see that? So in other words, we basically took the image, whoosh, whoosh, cut it in half both directions, and then swapped the pieces around. So that means the edges would now line up if we tiled this. The problem is that the seams, instead of being around at the edge, they are now in the middle. But it's also really easy to fix because we have generative fill now. So it used to be you would like do this and you'd have to try and like clone over it and like work it all out. But now we can just use generative fill. So I'm going to use the marquee selection tool to just make a pretty big selection here, because we can't just say, hey, Photoshop, figure out this seam. Like it's got to connect this crack here with this crack here, or figure out a new solve. So I want to give it plenty of room to work with. So I'm going to generate that. And then I guess we'll just do one at a time. So I've got this selected. Then I'm going to come up here to my, what is this thing called? Contextual taskbar. I'll never get over that mouthful. So I have my contextual taskbar on the screen. If you don't see yours, you can always find it by going to Window, and it's down here, contextual taskbar. And that's what this is. And then you'll notice with an active selection, it pops up and says, oh, do you want to use generative fill? Yes. Then it's saying, hey, what do you want to generate? And I'm like, you figure it out, Photoshop. So I'm just going to come over here and click generate. And then that is going to run. And it's working. It's working. Chewing on all those rocks. I did this yesterday and it did a really great job. Look at that. And there's still weirdness because we still have this seam, but we'll do that in a minute. But look, so there's one solution, another solution, and wow, good job, Photoshop. Which one do I like best? Probably this first one. Okay, so I'm going to just actually merge that down over here now. And then let's do the same thing with that vertical seam. So I'm going to use the selection tool to just grab this. I don't know if it has to be perfectly centered. I'm obsessing. There we go. But again, I made a pretty big selection, and we'll repeat the process. We go up to the contextual taskbar. We're going to click generative fill, leave the prompt blank, which means Photoshop gets to figure it out. And then we'll click generate. And now it's going to generate the vertical fill for this little area. So let's see, we cross our fingers, light a candle or something, and there it did it. So now we can see tough call. I'm kind of thinking maybe this one. I'm trying to think like overall when we repeat the pattern, what's just like the least eye-catching so that this is very neutral. So I think I might go with this one. So I'm just going to merge that down. So now this tile is going to repeat theoretically on all the edges. So let's try it. Let's go, let's turn on view pattern preview. not bad. Now I can see at any size that if you zoom out far enough, it's going to look pretty repetitive. Part of the issue that we're having is that there are some dark spots and some lighter spots. So if we zoom in on this, and let's see, there's a million ways to do this. Let's just dodge and burn the old-fashioned way because it's just easy right now. So I'm going to grab the good old-fashioned dodge tool and we'll set the exposure to like 10% maybe. And let's see if we can tackle these shadows a little bit. Oh, it's not going to preview the symmetry. Okay, well, let's turn that off for a minute. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm just trying to lighten up some of these shadows so that we have a little bit more of an even tone across the whole image. So maybe that's going to be a little bit better. So let's do this. Let's now go to our swatches, our pattern swatches, and I'll click to make a new swatch and we'll call it rocks. And let's put all of this, let's check in the chat, and then we're going to come back and put all of this into a mock-up and see what we think. So did we have any more stuff? Okay, so Sheila is saying, am I saying this right? OG is just a different shape instead of a triangle. So what I actually made was a square. So it looked like a diamond because I rotated it, but it was a square. And so I rotated it, which sort of gave us the ability to drag another one to the side like that, and that created that half drop. So I don't know if the half drop would work as well with a different shape because our tile was square. So the shape I made was a square, and then I just rotated it. I don't know that it would work with a different, maybe you could try it with like a hexagon or something. I'm not sure. If anyone has a definitive answer on that, chime on in. But that's a good question. But yeah, so just think of it, it wasn't a triangle. It was a square rotated 45 degrees. So it looked like a diamond. But yeah. Teresa says, I used to do this the old-fashioned way. It worked, but it was never excellent. AI makes it so much easier, right? True. Way, way easier for sure. I love that. And I've used that same technique to make like looping backgrounds, basically. Like a sky that you want to like scroll through and seamlessly repeat. That's a great technique for that if you're animating something. So that technique is an old school trick, but it is still awesome and actually can be really, really, really useful. So I'm grateful we still have it, and it's a good trick to keep in your bag. Okay, let's see what this would look like then in a mockup. So this is just some free mockup that I downloaded. We'll switch back over. There we go. This is a free mockup that I downloaded from somewhere. And currently it's got a lot of layers built into it, right? So some mockups, if you're not familiar with using them, there's all different kinds of mockups and all different layers of complexity and also quality. So I had to do a little bit of editing to this free file to make it actually look right. But I still like it. And sometimes a mockup could be just as simple as like a photo of a tote bag and you just like throw your pattern onto it. But in this case, I thought I would demonstrate with this file. So there's a lot going on. That's okay. The only thing we are concerned about is this layer right here, which has the pattern. So believe it or not, this is a pattern, a water pattern that just is included with Photoshop by default. So that's what we're currently looking at. So there's a few. These are the water patterns. Very lovely. And if we want to see the patterns we made, then all we have to do is in the layers panel, click on the pattern here. Or I guess we can just click it in the pattern panel too. But there's an advantage of doing it here, and I'll show you in a minute. So let's click one of our cactus patterns. So here is how it looks applied to this bedding. And maybe that's larger. Like maybe you don't want giant cacti. It's still weird to say cacti, right? Like I just want to say cactuses, but cacti on your bed. What's cool is when you double click the thumbnail here in the layers panel, you can also then reduce the scale. So this is what the pattern looks like at 100%. But if I hold the shift key and then I press the down arrow, I can decrease the pattern in 10% increments. So maybe down to like 50 is a little bit of a better scale for this application. So patterns are very application dependent. The pattern that you design to appear on a coffee mug is going to be a very different scale than what you would put on, a mural or wallpaper, perhaps. So you always want to know where the pattern is going to be used. I think that makes a big deal in how you design it and how that all works out. But so this is that pattern at 50%. Pretty cool, right? If we want to see our half drop pattern, we don't have to double click here. You can just click in the patterns panel. And so that's how that looks. And then if we want to change the scale, that's when you have to click in the layers panel on the pattern itself. So maybe we want this one bigger. I would probably scale that up a little bit more, maybe 80%. That's kind of fun. Like I would put cactus sheets on my bed. Looks good. If we want to see how our rock pattern looks, we can click on that. Not bad. If we scale it small enough, we probably will see some not so great tiling. Let's see. It doesn't look, anytime you scale it too small, it's going to start looking blocky. And you can see the problem is really just some of the different tonal ranges. So you'd have to play with it and maybe dodge and burn a little more to try and even that out. But that's still pretty cool. I think you can have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff too. And even if you're not making patterns per se, that technique is still, I think, really valuable for a lot of different things. Like I said, like looping animations. So that is pretty cool. What other questions do you guys have? And I don't know, what are you like, who's working on patterns that you want to experiment with? I love the idea of sending something to Spoonflower, and the hardest part is like, of course, that costs, nice. It's not cheap to have stuff printed over at Spoonflower, but and it's hard to decide. Like I could make patterns forever and then I just tend to keep them on my computer, and it's nice to send them out into the real world. So we want to do it. I encourage everybody to actually bring them into the world so you can enjoy them. Question here, how long is the stream? I don't know. It's probably wrapping up, but this is all going to be on YouTube. So after this, you can just come back and watch the recording on YouTube anytime. So never fear. Let's see. Other than that, I just want to encourage everybody to have fun and play with this stuff. Try different things. I was making some patterns the other day that were really bizarre with gradients and things that I would never have thought to do, but they ended up kind of cool. And I used them not for printing not for like output like this, but to create my own like halftone pattern, which was kind of funky. And it was really cool to experiment with that. And I actually used the offset. Oh, I can show you quick, just in case anyone's curious. So here's the pattern. This was just a shape that I pulled from default Photoshop shapes from the Legacy collection. So you do have to load the Legacy shapes. But I just added the shape, and then instead of just giving it a fill, I gave it a gradient fill. And I created two tiles with the same shape, but on one version, the shape was reversed. So here was the other one. So you can see one has black in the center and goes out to white, and the other one, and they're offset. So one, I just centered the shape on my canvas, and the other one, I took that centered shape, and after inverting the color scheme, I offset the whole thing. And then I layered the patterns on top of each other. I guess we could try that here. So if I like duplicate this layer and switch this pattern, this gets funky now. I was getting an effect like this. And I was also changing the blend mode to like hard mix. Look at this. This is wild. Whoa, look at that. So yeah, it's the same pattern tile, just inversed and offset. And then when you overlap them and you change the blend mode to hard mix, you get this funky effect. And it's kind of cool. So there's lots of different ways you can play with this. And I hope you find that exciting. Yeah. So I just want to remind everybody that we will be out in Phoenix next week for Creative Pro Week. And if you want to join us, we would love to see you there. The food is amazing, and that's always something I look forward to. In addition to the incredible people and the amazing sessions, I do look forward to the food too. Marcy always does a great job planning all the meals, and it's incredible. So looking forward to that. But you can also join us online. And for anybody who wants to check that out, if you go to creativeproweek.com and you use the code livestream, you can save $100. And yeah, you will get such great value out of it. It's a good time. It's like art camp, summer camp for grown-ups. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place with beautiful, amazing humans, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I hope to see you there in one way or another. And thank you for joining me here. And until next time, happy photoshopping. We'll see you. Take